Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, you have week 4 of my Goodreads project. Am I anywhere near what I would hope to have been by this point? No. However, I am still making good progress. It's not like I've gone multiple days without reading a particular... It's not like I've gone multiple days without reading books from here. It's not like I've gone any days. So there just were a lot more. My ambitions were much larger than the amount of time that I had to get it done in. But I'm going to start off with the category where I have been the most successful, and I'm actually fairly close, relatively close to finishing this off. And that is best middle grades and children. So at the time of filming, the winners are already up. By the time this video goes up, they've been out for several days. My reaction video is up. I will link that down below if I remember. And I plan to do a video comparing the overall results from Goodreads as well as my results, but that will be once I complete all of the categories. Now, that's the last that I'm going to talk about that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the middle grades and children's list, and I'm going to talk about the books that I read new for this week. The one thing that I will mention, the one book that I have not read from this list besides the children's books is Stellar Loon. I am making progress, but that was the one where I had to read the most books in the series to get up to that. So the first book that I read specifically for this week so this week I actually read only 2 books on this list, but it did change my rankings a bit. So this week I read 3 books on this list, if I remember correctly. I cannot remember whether I read Rise for the School of Good and Evil in last week or this week. So I'll talk about it a little bit in this one. So the first one is Bastille versus the Evil Librarians. This book did not take me long at all to read. This book did not take me long at all to read. And I just realized that I forgot about one that's ranked higher, but I'll talk about that in a second. So even though I have loved reading and going through Alcatraz's journey from book 1 now to book 6 just this year, this felt like an add-on, even though I know that it wasn't. It comes about 6 years after the 5th book, which I read just a few weeks ago, The Dark Talent, but it's very short and it's different yet the same because it's told from Bastille's point of view. That was the whole point with the series, and the fact that Alcatraz refused to write the concluding chapter. And I think that everything wrapped up really well. I think it was excellent character development, but parts of it felt a bit fan servicey and it just felt too short. Like all of it was action and there was no like downtime or real development. So I enjoyed it, but it wasn't my favorite of the series. I think The Dark Talent is actually my favorite of the series. The book that I forgot about and that I ranked really high and that I absolutely loved was The Ogres and the Orphans by Kelly Barnhill. Now, it didn't top Amari or New from Here. It came very close. I would actually say that numbers 1, 2, and 3 on this list are practically tied. And the way that Kelly Barnhill tells fairy tales is just fantastic. The story is told from the point of view of an omniscient narrator, and it's told in third person, although there is some first person when the narrator is talking about themselves, and that's revealed at the very end of the story, so I won't say who the narrator is. But she uses the exaggerations that you can get away with in a fairy tale to point out some very real things that people struggle with in day-to-day life. So I thought this was hands down phenomenal, and I've put it on my wish list. The one that I am not sure whether or not I read it last week or this week is Rise for the School of Good and Evil. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it last week, so I'll just talk brilliantly. Unevenly paced, odd oddly character focused, so not a favorite of mine. And then the last of the books that I know that I read specifically this week is The Girl in White. This took a while to get a hold of until I found an ebook copy on Hoopla. And I read this, but didn't really engage with it at all. Now, part of it was I was really tired when I was reading. And so I would read sections and know that I read it, but it wouldn't sink in and register what was happening in those sections. This was supposed to be a horror. And it's middle grades, so it's not going to be super horrific. But there is middle grades horror that is done really well that I don't necessarily enjoy because horror is not my thing, but it's done really well. Like Catherine Arden's Small Spaces series, as well as, I forget the name, but Night Books and Grave Books. Those are really well done. This is only marginally better than The Stitchers, which I read earlier this year. It's not really spooky at all. And I never engaged with it. So I don't think it was very well written. And thus, it's pretty towards the bottom of this list. I know that Stellar Loon, the only one that you see on here without a number, will be much higher up because I really enjoy the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. I just don't know right now where that will be because I have 3.5 books yet to read before I get to that. Next, we have the young adult fantasy and science fiction. I'm really close to finishing this section off. A couple of things are getting in my way. One, I'm still on multiple hold lists for various versions of Cursed. I did read Gilded as part of this section, but that was the backlist portion of it. I need to double check because I don't know that I have a copy of All That's Left in the World. I need to see if I have a copy of it. And Sunbury Trials, I have an ebook and an audiobook copy, and The Ballad Ever After, I have a physical and audiobook copy. I plan to listen to both of those this week, so those will get finished. Now, the thing about Kingdom of the Feared, I have a strong suspicion that I may end up DNFing the series and adding that to these Twisted Bonds as a cross out, but I do have the audiobook of the first book in the series, and I'm leaving it open to potentially DNFing the series before I get to Kingdom of the Feared. So I just need to make sure that I have All That's Left in the World. Now, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, and I'm going to talk about the books that I read this week that I don't think that I mentioned before. And if some of this is a repeat, I apologize. I've read a lot of books lately, and I don't necessarily remember which week I read them in. So I'm going to start with Foul Lady Fortune. This book really surprised me. The conclusion to her These Violent Delights duology was on last year's list, but I made the decision to not read it, and I'm sort of regretting that because I really want to go back and read that now, because I really enjoyed the way that Chloe Gong took history, a part of history that's not really talked about a lot, even though historians know that it happened, and added the fantastical into it. I thought it was really well done, and I'm really intrigued. Definitely going to be reading the sequel because she left it on a cliffhanger. And the cliffhanger ending goes for This Woven Kingdom as well. I probably would have read this sooner in the year, but a few mixed reviews put me off of it. But I really enjoyed This Woven Kingdom. It's not perfect, but it takes some tropes that you see in Arabian fantasy, which I'm discovering is something that I like, and it subverts them a little bit. And talk about a cliffhanger ending. This Woven Kingdom has even more of a cliffhanger ending than Foul Lady Fortune, so I'm actually really intrigued by that and really want to read the sequel. The only other book on this list that I read this week was a dud, because you can see it right there in last place. And that is So This Is Ever After by F.T. Lukens. I thought the concept of it was really intriguing. You have typical fantasy trope where the hero defeats the big bad in this grand culminating battle scene, and then you get and they lived happily ever after. And that's the play that the title is taking on. So This Is Ever After. This book opens with that scene where the hero, the main character, has defeated the big bad and then he's like, okay, now what? And it turns out he's made himself king somehow and tied himself to the throne with this really cool magic. And now he has to find a soulmate or he's basically going to fade away and die. And so that's what this story is about. But the thing is, this book took the idea of the fantasy world and added in modernity to it. So it was a mix of that, both in word choice as well as some of the things going on in that setting. And it just clashed for me. Some people like that. I never gelled with it. It didn't allow me to sink into the story itself and was jarring. And because I'd never gotten into the story, I really didn't like it at all, which is why it's last on this list. That brings us to fantasy, the adult fantasy. And this is the one going into it where I had heard about all of them, but read the least of them. I should have realized that it would be a stretch for me to be able to read all of these. But you can see on this list, there is a book on here that I knew was the book for me. And it made my number one. I didn't vote for it because I hadn't read it at the time of the close of voting. I could have voted for it, kind of having an inkling that I would love it, but I didn't. And that is Babel. I have talked about this book so much. Spoiler alert, you will be seeing it later this week in a very significant video. This is the book for me. Everything about it is tailor-made for me. The combination of history, of linguistics, the way that words capture meaning, and fantasy, magic. Hands down, I don't think that I will ever find a book more tailor-made for me. So that is my number one. The only other book that I read this week on the fantasy list is When Women Were Dragons. And I really enjoyed this one. I knew going into it that I had a high shot of enjoying this one because I have loved Kelly Barnhill's writing. And then so I read this one after Oaks and the Orphans, which was my second Kelly Barnhill book. And I'm like, okay, I really have a high shot of enjoying this book because both The Girl Who Drank the Moon and Ogres and the Orphans were 5 stars for me. I don't think that When Women Were Dragons is going to get a 5-star for me, which is totally fine. It's probably going to get a 4.5. I enjoyed it. I think it's probably going to be so close to a 5, like a 4.75 if I did quarter stars. The way that she sets up the story and talks about the great dragoning of 1955 and uses that to tell the story, to teach the lesson, is so reminiscent of what she's done in her middle grades. And I really loved the way that she wrote, her actual writing, the actual mechanics of the writing, and the way that conveyed the message with the short sentences and the repetition. It just was so brilliantly done. The thing that brings it down, potentially from a 5-star to like a 4.75, still really love, is the way that it dragged out the ending, the denouement. I wish it had ended sooner at a different point in the climax and hadn't stretched on as much as it did. I think that would have made it a hands down 5-star read and might have put it above Nettle and Bone. But at 5, I have loved all of those books. River Enchanted is still a 5-star. So maybe I will end up rating it 5 stars, but it would have been even higher on this list without that ending piece. Now, going forward, the next book that I plan to read it later today, is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. It's more of a romance, but I've heard that it's more cozy fantasy, and it might be along the lines of The House from the Cerulean Sea, which I really enjoyed. So I'm intrigued about that. I'm not sure what I'm going to be reading next after that on this list, but hopefully in this next week, I can make my way through as many of these as possible. So there you have week 5. So there you have week 4 of my Goodreads Choice Awards project. I'm going to have one more weekly update and then a video where I compare my rankings to the Goodreads rankings, which my rankings are probably not going to be anywhere similar to the Goodreads rankings, there's already significant difference. There's already significant differences in the rankings, but I'll leave further comment about that. I think by the time next week rolls around and I have made that update, I'm just thinking about the timing because next week at this time, so next Sunday, I am not going to be by my computer to look at my list. So I might have to use my phone. I'm going to be in a different location filming that update, and I'm probably going to have to change up when I post it because I will not have a computer available to me to post the video potentially. So there may be some changes in the week 5 timing, but in the next week, I don't think that I will finish all of the books. I think I will come really close, but in the time between the last update video and my overall comparison video, I hope to have finished all of these books. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.